Hello, everyone. I'm here today to talk about how to find credible sources for your projects one and projects two. So let's go ahead and get right into it and start off by talking about scholarly databases. Um, so scholarly databases like Google Scholar, Oxford Academic, Microsoft Academic, and ASU has their own academic database called JSTOR. These are great places to start. If you're wondering how to access JSTOR, go ahead and just go to jstore.org over here, as you can see in the top left, jstore.org. That's all you're looking for right there, and you'll need to click login right here, and it'll ask for an ArtStore account. But what you can do instead is log in with Google, and if you already have your ASU email part of your Google, it'll show up after you click that. But if not, you can go here and click on Find My Institution. You'll be able to see Arizona State University right at the top. It'll ask, are you in Arizona? It's asking that for me because I am in Arizona, I would imagine. But if not, then you can just go ahead and type in Arizona State, click that, and you can search any topic that you're researching, whatever that may be. You can search on here, see if it's on there, possibly. But if not, other databases like Google Scholar, Oxford Academic, and Microsoft Academic, those three are some of my favorites. But just to back up a little bit, if you're struggling with even figuring out where to start, when it comes to finding sources you can use for your topic or your project, then just searching on Google is a really great and simple way to start. And you can kind of just branch off from there into these scholarly databases. Additionally, online sources like websites can be really good as well, but it's important you're gathering information from a governmental or educational website, and you can tell if these are a government website or educational website by the domain name. It'll say .gov or .edu. Additionally, news sources, this is where things can get a bit tricky because news is so biased nowadays. You really have to be sure where you're getting your information from, if it's a news source, political, scientific, or financial backings. Just be really aware of their history. But I have found that Reuters, the Associated Press, and Forbes are credible sources, largely for unbiased news. So if you are looking for media quotes or maybe public interviews, and you're looking to find a news source that can give you that, then I would definitely recommend looking at those three or starting there at least. And if you find something from a different news source, just make sure you're doing your research into them and seeing the kind of people that support them and, where their bias lies, if there is any bias. Lastly, the library. If you're having trouble finding a credible source online through these databases, websites, or other news sites, then strongly recommend checking out your local library. Or if you're in Arizona, you can check out an ASU library. Obviously, a source from a library is pretty credible instantaneously because you're grabbing it from a library, but also it's a really easy way to check the author's body of work and see where that book or source you're using was actually published and the publication company. Moving on, another thing that's really important to touch on is relevancy. So it's super important that whatever source you're using, you want to make sure that it's relevant. A way to kind of do that is just check when it was written or when it was published. And I would recommend saying that if a source you're looking at is more than 10 years old, maybe stay away from using that. A lot of things can change within 10 years, and obviously depends on what your topic is, what you're writing about. But I would largely recommend staying away from anything written more than 10 years ago. The last thing I want to touch on here is something called the CRAP test. It is an acronym that stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So currency relates to, is the source up to date / recent? It's, basically what I just talked about in regards to relevancy. Moving on to the next part of the acronym, relevance. How relevant is the source to the rest of your research? Does it instantly fit in with whatever you're talking about? Or do you really have to, pull out some strings to make it connect? If you're having to pull out some strings and, you're struggling with making it connect to your research, you might really love that information, but maybe it's best to just drop that source entirely rather than struggle with making it connect and fit into whatever you're talking about for your project. So next there's authority, which is asking what's the background of the author and where was the source published. So this is super important. This is a super important thing to consider when looking for sources for your projects. It's always very, very important you consider the background of the author, because just like news sites, authors themselves are biased. But what's important is that, you know, you're making sure that you're grabbing a source from an author who isn't letting, you know, their biases come into their work and then affecting your project because you're grabbing a source from a very biased author or, you know, a biased organization, biased publication company. You really just want to do your research into these authors and the source of wherever it was published. Really important that you double check those things. Moving on to accuracy. So does the source use strong evidence to back up its claims? This is another thing that sets a credible source apart from an online blog post or a Facebook post or a Twitter post. Anybody can get on these online forums and social media websites and apps and say anything, but it doesn't really mean much if they're not backing up their claims with evidence. And that's essentially what you're doing here. You're looking for online sources to back up your own claims in your projects. You also want to make sure that the sources you're using have backed up their claims as well. Lastly, I want to touch on purpose. So what is the reason this source exists? What is the ultimate goal that they're trying to accomplish here by sharing this information and by writing this source and by letting people read it? And lastly, something else I want to touch on is purpose. So kind of going back to what I mentioned in authority, but what is the reason this source exists? Asking yourself this as you're looking over a source and trying to figure out whether or not you should use it is another good way to figure out if it's biased, if you can spot its biases, and if those are heavy enough to, you know, outweigh using it in your own projects. So that is all that I have for you today. If you enjoyed this, if you think this is helpful, then feel free to download it. That way you have it as you're working throughout the course on your project 1 and project 2 drafts, and you can just refer to it whenever you need to. Additionally, if you have any other questions that I didn't touch on here about how to find credible sources or, you know, how to use the scholarly databases or anything that I might have missed here, feel free to reach out to me via Canvas message or through email. I will be sure to get back to you as quick as I can and help you out there.